The great chamber of the Galactic Concordance was silent. It was a silence that held weight, made from the breath of 100 different species, the hum of ancient technology, and the gravity of the words about to be spoken. The air itself seemed thick, smelling of ozone and something older, like dust from between the stars. Elder Cthar stood slowly. His body was covered in a hard, shell-like material, dark and glossy, but it was covered in fine lines and cracks, like an old pot. He was so old that the other members of the Concordance, even the long-lived ones, saw him as a walking piece of history. When he moved, it was with a soft, clicking sound. His eyes, deep and dark, looked over the assembly. They finally settled on a group of newcomers. They were of his own kind, the Cthar, but they were young. Their shells shone with a bright, iridescent color, reflecting the chamber's light in proud flashes. At their front was Overseer Vlark. He stood straight and tall, the picture of new strength and ambition. "The galaxy is wide," Cthar began, his voice a low rasp, like two stones grinding together. "It holds wonders and dangers beyond counting. Our concordance has lasted for thousands of your years because we have rules, laws that are not written on stone, but carved into our survival." He paused, letting his words be translated for all the species present. "The first and most important of these laws is about the forbidden sectors. There are places we do not go, not because they are dangerous to us in a simple way, but for our own preservation." A few of the younger Cthar shifted. Vlarka's face, what could be seen of it under his shell, showed a flicker of impatience. He saw these old rules as chains. "There is one system above all others that is forbidden," Cthar continued, his voice becoming even more serious. "The system they call soul, the home of the species called humanity. You must never, for any reason, provoke them." This time Vlark could not stay silent. A short, sharp laugh escaped him. It was a harsh sound in the quiet room. "You speak of the humans?" Vlark said, his voice loud and clear. "The ones who are still fighting over patches of dirt on their own world? The ones who have barely learned to swim in the ocean of space between their own planet and its moon? You fear them?" Cthar turned his old, heavy gaze fully onto his great-grandson. The weight of it made Vlarka's proud posture stiffen just a little. "I do not fear what they are now," Cthar said slowly. "I fear what they are. Their history is not a simple story. It is a tapestry, a weaving of great beauty and great horror. They are a species of opposites. They can create music that can make a heart break and build weapons that can break a world. They do not fight for simple things like water or land. They fight for ideas, for a flag, for a word like freedom. And when they are pushed, when they are truly provoked, their minds become their greatest weapon. A weapon that does not care for its own safety." He took a slow, clicking step forward. "Long ago we watched them. We saw what they called their world wars. They turned their entire planet into a battlefield. They did not just fight soldiers. They fought cities. They fought children. They created bombs that could turn cities to dust and poison the air for generations. And the most terrifying part? They did this to themselves. They were their own enemy. They are a storm contained in a fragile bottle." Cthar looked around the room, making sure every being understood. "We, the elders who saw this, made a choice. Quarantine. We would leave them alone. We would place their system off limits. Not as a punishment to them, but as a safety measure for the rest of us. We hoped that given enough time, centuries, maybe millennia, they would calm. They would mature. They would outgrow this madness inside them." Vlark listened, but he did not hear the warning. He only heard the fear. To him, fear was a sign of weakness. The old were always afraid of the new. They clung to their safe, small worlds while the strong reached for more. "Elder," Vlark said, trying to sound respectful but failing to hide his scorn. "With respect, your words are based on stories from a long time ago. The Cthar ascendancy is now the strongest power in the Concordance. Our technology is beyond anything those primitive humans can dream of. They are emotional, unstable, weak. To call them a storm is to give them too much credit. They are a brief squall on a forgotten world. They have nothing we need, and they pose no threat we cannot handle. Kthar felt a deep sadness then. It was a cold feeling in his old bones. He saw the future in Vlark's proud eyes. He saw the misstep before it was taken. "You are wrong," Kthar said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it filled the room. "Their weakness is an illusion. Their divisions are what make them dangerous. You see a fractured people and think they are broken. I see 100 different ways of thinking, 100 different kinds of cleverness, all waiting for a reason to come together. And if you give them that reason, if you become the common enemy that unites them, you will see that squall become a hurricane that will sweep across the stars. They do not fight like we do. They do not think like we do. To provoke them is to light a fuse on a bomb whose blast radius we cannot calculate. It is the one mistake from which there is no return." But Vlark was no longer listening. He had already decided. The humans were a puzzle, and he was going to be the one to solve it. He would prove the old ways were wrong. He saw a species that needed to be brought into the fold, by force if necessary. He saw a prize, not a peril. The meeting ended. The other species left the chamber, whispering among themselves about the elder's warning and the overseer's pride. Kthar stood alone for a long time, looking out a great window at the swirling galaxy beyond. He saw the bright pinprick of a star called Sol. He had done his duty. He had given the warning, and as he watched that distant, unimportant-looking star, he felt a certainty colder than space itself. It was not a question of if his great-grandson would make the mistake. It was only a question of when, and he knew with a terrible clarity that when it happened, it would ruin everything. The silence of space near Mars was broken by a single, sleek ship. It was a Kthar scout vessel, all sharp angles and shimmering dark metal. It moved without a sound, a ghost in the void. Its name, in the Kthar language, meant stalking bird. Inside, the commander, a junior officer named Klen, checked his orders for the third time. They came directly from Overseer Vlark himself. It was a great honor, and a great risk. The orders were simple: enter the Sol system, perform a routine boundary inspection, and, as a secondary objective, acquire a primitive human artifact for cultural analysis. Vlark wanted to understand these creatures the elders feared so much. He believed you could know a species by the junk they left behind. Klen guided the ship inward, past the red planet. His crew was nervous. They had all heard the stories, the elders' warnings, but they were also loyal to the ascendancy and to Vlark's new vision of strength. "We are being painted by targeting sensors," one of his officers said. His voice was tight. "Multiple sources. From the planet they call Earth and from their orbital platforms. They are watching us." Klen felt a chill, but he pushed it down. "They are just watching. They are curious, like animals seeing a new predator. Ignore them. Maintain course." The ship sailed on, deeper into the system. The blue and white marble of Earth grew larger. And there, hanging in the blackness, was its moon. Gray, dead, and covered in dust. "Scan for the artifact," Klen ordered. "The Overseer's data packet says it is a small, wheeled vehicle, left there by their first space explorers. It should be in a region called the Sea of Tranquility." The scanners swept the surface. It did not take long to find it. A small, metal thing. It had 6 wheels and a funny, boxy body. It looked like a child's toy abandoned in a sandbox. One of its little panels was still open, like a wing catching the sun. "There it is," the officer said. "Designation: Lunar Roving Vehicle. Humanity called it the Moon Buggy." Klen looked at the image. Seemed so small and fragile. So unimportant. This was what the elders were afraid of? A species that left its toys on a rock? "Prepare the tractor beam," Klen said. "We will take it." Down on Earth, in a quiet room deep underground, 2 people watched the same scene unfold on a large screen. The room was filled with the soft glow of monitors and the quiet hum of computers. The man was named Jean. He was a diplomat. His job was to stay calm when everyone else was panicking. He wore a simple, dark suit and his hands were clasped behind his back. His face showed no emotion, but his knuckles were white. The woman next to him was named Sue. She was a linguist. Her job was to understand not just words, but meaning. She had headphones on, and her fingers flew across a keyboard, analyzing the alien ship's energy signatures and any communication it might be sending. "They are not responding to our hails," Sue said, her voice calm but focused. "Not on any frequency. They are just continuing." "Where are they going?" Gene asked, his voice low. "Their trajectory is taking them to a low orbit around the moon." Sue zoomed the screen in on the alien ship. A faint, shimmering beam of energy shot out from its underside, reaching down towards the lunar surface. "They are activating a tractor beam." The room held its breath. They watched as the shimmering beam touched the old, dusty lunar rover. The little vehicle, which had sat silently for over a century, was gently lifted from the ground. A small cloud of moon dust poofed out around it as it rose, like a final goodbye. Then, it was pulled smoothly into the alien ship's cargo hold. The bay door closed. The screen in the quiet room showed the empty spot on the moon where the rover had been. It was just a set of tire tracks leading to nothing. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, Gene spoke. His voice was still quiet, but it now had an edge like a knife. "They did not take a rock," he said. "They did not take a soil sample. They took a monument." On the Cthar ship, Clem felt a wave of relief. The mission was a success. It had been so easy. The humans had done nothing. They had just watched. The Elder's fears were clearly just stories. He opened a channel to report to Vlark. "Overseer, the artifact has been acquired. There was no resistance. The humans are passive." Back on the command ship at the edge of the system, Vlark received the news with a proud smile. He turned to his aides. "You see, the Elder is lost in his old nightmares. The humans are weak. They have no will. They let us walk into their home and take a piece of their history. What kind of species does that?" He sent a new order to Clen. "Return immediately. We have what we need." On Earth, Gene and Sue were not being passive. They were processing the event. Sue replayed the last communication she had intercepted from the Cthar ship. "I have a translation of their internal comms," she said. "The scout commander just reported to his superior. He said the artifact was acquired. He said we were passive." Jin's eyes narrowed. "They see it as a collection mission. They see us as animals in a zoo, and they just took a feather." "What are your orders, sir?" an officer across the room asked. "The alien vessel is turning. It is preparing to leave the system." Gene looked at the screen. He saw the empty spot on the moon. He thought about the thousands of engineers, the millions of people who saw that little rover as a symbol. It was proof that they could reach for the stars. It was their first step. And this arrogant, alien race had just stolen it like picking a flower. He knew what this was. It was not an act of war. It was something worse. It was an insult. A dismissal. He keyed a communication channel. It was not a military channel. It was a global one. It went to every government, every defense network, every scientific outpost on Earth and beyond. "This is Diplomat Gene," he said, his voice calm and clear, echoing in rooms all over the planet. "An alien vessel, identified as Cthar, has entered the Sol system without permission. It has ignored all hails. It has now taken a protected cultural artifact from the lunar surface. The moon buggy is gone." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "This is not an attack on our security. It is an attack on our memory. They have taken more than a machine. They have taken a symbol of our first steps beyond our cradle. They have shown us that they do not see us as equals. They see us as things to be studied, to be taken from." He took a slow breath. "The time for talking is over. They have made their intentions clear. This is a provocation." He looked at Sue, who gave him a single, sharp nod. "The response," Gene said, his final word on the matter, "will be proportionate." On the Cthar scout ship, Clen was feeling good. They were accelerating away from the moon, heading for the system's edge. Soon they would be back in friendly space, and he would be praised for his success. "Commander," his sensor officer said, his voice suddenly confused. I am reading new energy signatures from the asteroid belt. It's a mass driver, a very large one. It's powering up. Cleneth's feeling of relief vanished. A mass driver? That's primitive technology. They throw rocks. What is it targeting? The officer's face under his shell went pale. It's not targeting anything, sir. It's just firing. At that moment, a simple, unbreakable law of physics took over. A large tungsten rod, longer than a bus, was launched from a hidden platform in the asteroid belt. There was no explosive. There was no guidance system. It was just a rock, pushed to an incredible speed. It crossed the distance between the belt and the moon's orbit in silence. It did not glow. It did not shine. It was a dark arrow shot across a dark ocean. The Cthar ship's shields were designed for energy weapons, for plasma and lasers. They were not designed for a solid object moving at a fraction of the speed of light. The scout ship did not explode. It simply came apart. The kinetic impact was so immense, so total, that the ship shattered into a million pieces. One moment it was there, a proud vessel of the Cthar ascendancy. The next, it was a cloud of glittering debris, spreading silently in the void. The last thing on Cleneth's sensors was the image of the projectile that killed him. It was not a missile. It was just a rock. A simple, basic, terrible rock. Back on Earth, in the quiet room, Jean watched the alien ship's signal vanish from the screen. Sue looked at him. The target has been neutralized. Jean nodded slowly. They took a piece of our past, he said. We have just introduced them to our present. The news of the scout ship's destruction reached Overseer Vlark like a physical blow. He stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Starblade, and stared at the data screen. The signal from Cleneth's ship was gone. Simply gone. Replaced by a cloud of expanding debris near the human moon. Rage, hot and sharp, filled him. It was not grief for the lost crew. It was fury at the insult, the humiliation. These primitives had dared to strike back. They had swatted his ship from the sky as if it were a bug. They destroyed it, he roared, his voice echoing in the quiet bridge. The crew flinched. A concordance vessel, with a rock. The report was unbelievable. A mass driver. It was technology the Cthar had considered obsolete for 1,000 years. It was like being attacked with a stone axe. His senior officer, a cautious veteran named Clore, spoke carefully. Overseer, the scout ship took a human artifact without permission. We provoked them. Perhaps we should pause. Consult with the concordance. With Elder Cthar. Vlark turned on him, his eyes blazing. Pause? They have killed our people. They have shown their true, violent nature. This is why the galaxy must be unified under a strong hand. Under my hand. If we show weakness now, every species will think they can defy us. He saw it all clearly. This was not a tragedy. It was an opportunity. The humans had given him a reason to use his full power. He would crush them, and the rest of the concordance would fall in line, terrified of his wrath. Dispatch the punitive fleet, Vlark commanded, his voice cold and final. 3 war cruisers. Their orders are to enter Earth's orbit and make a statement. They are to target one of their largest cities. A single, decisive strike. I want the humans to watch as one of their precious nests is turned to glass. Let them understand the cost of defying the Cthar ascendancy. Clore felt a deep dread. This was the misstep the Elder had warned about. But he was a soldier, and he obeyed. On Earth, the mood was not one of panic, but of grim preparation. The destruction of the scout ship was not celebrated. It was understood as an opening move. They knew the Cthar would be back, and this time it would not be a single scout. Jean and Sue were now in a different room. This one was louder, filled with the chatter of technicians and military personnel. It was the Global Defense Coordination Center. Screens showed the trajectories of the 3 massive Cthar warcruisers moving toward Earth. They were huge, menacing shapes on the display, their energy signatures blazing. A woman with sharp eyes and grease on her hands stood beside Jean. Her name was Hannah. She was an engineer. She had helped design the orbital defense grid and the mass drivers in the asteroid belt. "They are approaching orbital insertion," a general said, his voice tense. "Shall we launch our interceptors? Activate the plasma batteries?" Hannah shook her head. She was looking at the energy readings of the Cthar ships.
No.
"Their shields are too strong for our plasma. They are designed for energy-based combat. They will absorb our best shots and keep coming." "Then what do you suggest?" the general asked, frustrated. Hannah smiled a little. It was not a nice smile. "We don't play their game. We don't try to break their shields. We blind them. We deafen them." She turned to her team. "Initiate Project Gillerhorn. Focus all orbital microwave arrays on their primary sensor clusters. I want their eyes to burn. And ready the EMP pulses. Target their communication masts." She then looked at a stern-faced soldier standing near the door. His name was Chul. He was a sergeant, leader of an orbital marine squad. His face was a mask of calm. "Sergeant, are your teams ready?" Chul nodded once. "The shuttles are loaded. The charges are set." The general looked confused. "Shuttles? What shuttles? We are not sending men against those ships. It would be suicide." "They are not military shuttles, sir," Hannah explained calmly. "They are modified construction pods, the kind we use for asteroid mining. Their hulls are coated in radar-absorbent material. They are very, very quiet, and the Marines are not going to fight." The 3 Cthar warcruisers settled into a high orbit over Earth. The commander of the lead ship, Cruiser Resolve, looked down at the planet. He could see the lights of the cities, the swirl of clouds. It looked peaceful. He selected a target on the coast, a sprawling city of millions. His finger hovered over the firing control for the main plasma cannon. "Target locked," his weapons officer said. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge. The main viewer flickered and died into static. "Report!" the commander barked. "Our sensors are overloading. Massive microwave interference is coming from their orbital platforms. We are blind." At the same time, a powerful electromagnetic pulse washed over the ships. It was not strong enough to damage their systems, but it was perfectly tuned to fry their external communication arrays. "Communications are down. We cannot talk to the other ships or the command vessel." The Resolve was suddenly floating blind and deaf in space. On the Starblade, Vlark watched in fury as the 3 warcruisers on his screen suddenly went dark, their active signals vanishing, becoming unresponsive ghosts. "What are they doing?" he screamed. Down on Earth, Chul and his team felt their small, cramped shuttle shudder as it latched onto the hull of the Resolve. The mining magnet sealed with a solid thump. There was no dramatic entrance. They used a precision laser cutter, the kind used for slicing apart valuable asteroids, to burn a neat, circular hole through the outer hull, bypassing the airlocks. They moved inside, their boots magnetic on the metal floors. The interior of the alien ship was strange, with smooth, organic-looking walls and strange, glowing symbols. They did not meet any resistance. The Cthar were in chaos on the bridge, trying to regain their sight and hearing. They never thought the humans would come inside. Chul's team moved with practiced efficiency. They were not there to fight. They were there to deliver a package. They navigated through the empty corridors, following schematics Hannah's team had guessed based on the ship's external design. They found the engineering bay, the heart of the ship. The Cthar engineers inside looked up in shock. They were not soldiers. They fumbled for tools, for alarms. Chul's team didn't fire a shot. They simply placed 3 large, blocky objects on the deck plates near the main power conduit. The charges had simple timers. They beeped once, a red light starting to blink. Chul looked at the terrified Cthar engineers. He gave them a short, sharp gesture with his hand. "Get out." Then his team turned and ran, back through the hole in the hull into their waiting shuttle. They detached and sped away into the darkness. The same thing was happening on the second warcruiser. The third ship, seeing the 2 other shuttles attached, was starting to power up its point defense lasers, but it was still blind. A laser shot wildly, missing the small, fast shuttle by miles. Chul's shuttle was a safe distance away when the charges on the Resolve detonated. There was no fiery explosion to be seen from the outside. The blast was contained. But inside, the engineering bay was torn apart. The power conduit ruptured. The great ship's engines flickered and died. All its internal lights went out. The Resolve was now a dead, dark piece of metal, drifting silently. The second warcruiser suffered the same fate. The third, its sensors beginning to clear, saw the two dead ships and the small human shuttles retreating. It did not fire. It did not advance. It simply turned and began a frantic retreat, pushing its engines to escape on the bridge of the Star Blade. Vlark was silent. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, sickening confusion. He had sent 3 of his most powerful warships. One was crippled. One was dead. One was running. And they had not even seen a human soldier. He looked at the screen, at the dark, lifeless hull of the Resolve. The humans had not tried to destroy it. They had simply turned it off. He had no words. The Elder's warning echoed in his mind, and for the first time, a sliver of real fear entered his heart. The silence on the bridge of the Starblade was heavier than any sound. Overseer Vlark stared at the tactical display. One of his warcruisers was a dead husk. Another was crippled, its engines cold. The third was fleeing back to the fleet, its commander babbling about ghosts and silent attacks. They had not fired a single shot. His pride was a shattered thing. The hot anger was gone, replaced by a cold, churning confusion. This was not how war was fought. This was not a battle. It was a lesson, and he was the slow student. "How?" he whispered, the word cracking in the quiet room. "Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is a joke. How did they do this?" His senior officer, Clore, did not answer. He simply watched the drifting hulk of the Resolve on the screen, a monument to their failure. Suddenly, a new signal pierced the silence. It was an incoming transmission. Broadband, unencrypted. It was coming from Earth. "Put it on the main viewer," Vlark ordered, his voice rough. The screen flickered to life. It showed 2 humans, a man and a woman, sitting calmly at a simple metal table. They looked ordinary. The man, Jean, had a calm face. The woman, Sue, had sharp, intelligent eyes. "Overseer Vlark," Jean began, his voice clear and steady. There was no anger in it, no fear. It was the voice of someone stating a simple fact. "You entered our home. You stole a piece of our history. You have now seen a fraction of our present capability. This conflict need not continue. Withdraw your forces from the Sol system. Stand down." Vlark felt his confusion boil back into rage. How dare they speak to him this way? After what they had done? "You have attacked the Galactic Concordance," Vlark screeched, leaning toward the screen. "You destroyed a scout ship. You crippled a warcruiser. You will be annihilated for this. Your world will be scoured clean." He expected to see fear. He saw nothing. The woman, Sue, tilted her head slightly. "You misunderstand," she said, her tone as calm as her companion's. It was the tone of a teacher correcting a minor error. "The vessel that destroyed your scout ship was not a warship. It is an automated mining platform. Its primary function is to break apart asteroids for raw materials. The kinetic projectile was a repurposed mining charge." She let that sink in for a moment. The bridge crew of the Starblade shifted uncomfortably. "And the boarding action against your warcruisers," Sue continued. "Those were not military personnel. The shuttles are civilian construction pods, used for orbital welding and repairs. The individuals who boarded your ship were private security contractors. Their usual job is to protect corporate assets from asteroid pirates." Jean spoke again. "You have not yet provoked our soldiers. You have not yet faced our unified military. You have been fighting our miners, our engineers, and our security guards. You are losing a war against our civilian workforce." The words hit Vlark with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back a step. Miners? Construction workers? Security guards? It was impossible. It was an insult that defied all understanding of warfare. His grand, punitive fleet had been humiliated not by an army, but by laborers. Before he could form a reply, another voice cut through the communication channel. It was a voice everyone on the bridge recognized instantly. It was old and raspy, and filled with a terror so profound it made the air feel cold. Vlark! It was Elder Cthar. His face appeared on a split screen, his ancient eyes wide with horror. You fool! You blind, arrogant child! Can you not see? I warned you! I warned you all! The Elder was not looking at Vlark. He was looking past him, at the humans on the screen, and his fear was a living thing. Their civilization is their military. Cthar cried out, his voice breaking. There is no separation. Do you understand? Every one of their engineers is a weapons designer. Every one of their programmers is a cyber warrior. Every miner knows how to shape the void itself into a weapon. Their freighters can be warships. Their communication networks can be a plague. You have not been fighting a part of them. You have been fighting the very nature of their society. He turned his frantic gaze to Vlark. You thought their divisions made them weak? It makes them adaptable. 1,000 different paths to the same end. You have not attacked a fortress, you have kicked a hornet's nest. And now the entire swarm is awakening. Stand down. Apologize. Beg for their mercy before it is too late for all of us. But it was already too late. The message had been sent. The decision had been made. On Earth. Jean watched the two alien faces on his screen. One was the arrogant overseer, now pale and shaken. The other was the wise elder, consumed by a fear he had carried for centuries. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to someone off-screen. The warning has been given, Jean said, his voice final. The demonstration is over. You have chosen to continue your aggression. The response will now escalate. The transmission from Earth ended. The screen went dark. On the star blade. The only sound was Elder Cthar's ragged breathing over the comms. Then, that too cut off. Vlark stood in the center of his bridge, utterly alone. The grand conquest he had imagined was a lie. The weak species he had mocked had just revealed themselves to be something else entirely. They were not a military that had a society. They were a society that had become a military. He had not provoked a nation. He had provoked an entire way of life. He looked at the silent stars on the view screen. Somewhere out there, humanity was moving, not with a fleet but with a purpose. The hornet's nest was stirring, and he had no idea what form the swarm would take. The fear the Elder had spoken of was no longer a story. It was a cold reality growing in his own heart. He had ruined everything. The silence on Earth was not the silence of fear. It was the quiet of a machine coming to life. There were no sirens, no panic in the streets. There was only a grim, unified purpose. The words of the alien overseer had been heard by everyone. The threat of annihilation had been made. The time for demonstrations was over. In the command center, Jean and Sue watched the main screen. It showed the Cthar fleet, still hovering at the edge of the system. They were regrouping, licking their wounds. They thought the humans were preparing their warships, their grand fleet. They were wrong. Hannah, the engineer, stood at her console. Her fingers flew across the screen, entering a long authorization code. Her face was set in a look of intense focus. The Cthar societal analysis is complete, Sue said from her station. Their structure is rigid, a strict hierarchy. Their power is based on controlling technology and information. Their subject species are kept in line through superiority. Jean listened, then nodded. Then we do not break their ships. We break their system. Hannah finished her code. A single button glowed red on her screen. It was labeled not with a weapon's name, but with a single word, Gellerhorn. Global Launch Command is ready, she said, her voice calm. All silos report green. These were not missile silos. They were communication silos. Scattered across the globe, hidden in deserts and mountains, were thousands of launch tubes. But they did not hold warheads. They held drones. Small, fast, and incredibly smart drones. And each drone carried a payload not of explosives, but of data. A simple FTL communications buoy. Objective? A general asked, his voice hushed. Total galactic broadcast, Jean replied. We are going to send a message to every Cthar world, every colony, every ship, and to every species that lives under their rule. He gave the final order. Execute. On the surface of Earth, in a dozen remote locations, hatches slid open. With a silent, powerful push, the drones were launched into the sky. They were like a cloud of locusts, rising from the planet, their engines flaring for a brief moment before they shot out into the deep black of space. They did not head for the Cthar fleet. They shot past them, ignoring them completely. Their targets were the stars themselves, the specific coordinates of every known Cthar-held system. From the bridge of the Starblade, Vlark watched the sensor readings with confusion. What is that? He asked, pointing at the swarm of small contacts leaving Earth. Are they missiles? Fighters? His sensor officer frowned.
No, overseer.
Their energy signatures are too small. Their mass is negligible. They are messenger drones. They are deploying FTL buoys. Messenger drones. Vlark felt a wave of relief. They are sending a plea for help. They are begging the Concordance for mercy. They see our true strength now. He laughed, a short, brittle sound. The humans were finally acting logically. They were defeated and were suing for peace. Let them send their messages, Vlark said, waving a dismissive hand. It will make their surrender official. He did not understand. He could not understand. Weeks passed. The drones, using their simple but effective FTL drives, arrived at their destinations. One by one, in the skies above the Cthar homeworld, above their lush colony planets, above their mining outposts, the buoys activated. They did not broadcast a plea for mercy. They began to transmit data, a flood of pure, unfiltered information. On the Cthar homeworld, in the central plaza of their gleaming capital city, the sky lit up with a massive holographic projection. It showed grainy, ancient footage from Earth. It showed humans in muddy trenches, charging forward with bayonets. It showed the skies filled with primitive flying machines, pilots shooting at each other with pistols. It showed the horror of their world wars, the cities in flames, the terrible, destructive power they had turned on themselves. The Cthar citizens stopped and watched. They saw a level of chaotic, brutal warfare they had never imagined. They saw a species that had no quit in them. Then the transmission changed. It began broadcasting military manuals. Not advanced physics, but simple, effective guides. How to make explosives from common fertilizer. How to disrupt a power grid with a simple magnet. How to organize a resistance cell. How to fight a stronger enemy by never meeting them in open battle. It showed schematics for turning a farming drone into a weapon, for using a communication device to jam signals. It was a library of guerrilla warfare, translated into 100 different languages, including those of the Cthara subject species. At the same time, the broadcast showed other things. It showed human art. It played human music, beautiful, sad, and triumphant. It showed their literature, stories of underdogs winning, of hope in dark places. It showed the depth of the human spirit, the very thing the Cthar had provoked. The effect was not instant, but it was seismic. On a Cthar mining colony, the Telani, a species of strong, reptilian laborers who had been enslaved for generations, watched the broadcasts. They saw the humans, a species they had never heard of, fighting against impossible odds. They saw the simple instructions for creating disruption. That night, a key power relay station mysteriously exploded. The Cthar overseers did not find a bomb. They found a homemade capacitor, built from scavenged parts, exactly as the human broadcast had described. On a Cthar warship, the crew, who had been taught that their technology made them invincible, watched the footage of the human boarding action. They saw how simple, determined individuals could cripple a mighty ship. A low murmur of discontent spread through the crew. For the first time, they felt vulnerable. The Cthara's power, built on a foundation of control and superiority, began to crack. The information was a virus. It did not kill anyone. It simply gave ideas. It taught the galaxy how to be free. and in doing so, it taught them how to fight back. Weeks turned into months aboard the Starblade. The silence from the Cthar command was no longer one of planning, but of dread. The reports trickled in, each one worse than the last. They were not reports of battles lost, but of an empire unraveling. Overseer Vlark sat in his command chair, but he no longer gave orders. He simply stared at the incoming data streams. The screens told a story of collapse. The Telani miners on Colony 7 had not just sabotaged a power station. They had organized. Using human tactics of decentralized cells, they had taken over the entire orbital dockyard. They weren't using plasma rifles. They were using mining lasers and industrial cutters. The GR-Val, a species of traitors, had begun a system-wide strike, crippling Cthar supply lines. Their demands were simple: independence. Their methods, learned from human history, were peaceful protest and economic refusal. On the Cthar homeworld itself, there were riots. Not from the subject species, but from the Cthar youth. They had seen the human art, heard their music. They saw a galaxy of vibrant, chaotic life, and they saw their own rigid society as a cage. They were not fighting with weapons, but with ideas, and ideas were an enemy the Cthar military did not know how to fight. A final, official report flashed on the main screen. It was from the Concordance High Council. Vlark's family, his political allies, had been removed from power. The Cthar ascendancy was being placed under Concordance guardianship. The reason was listed as catastrophic failure of leadership and galactic destabilization. The Cthar ascendancy, a power that had stood for 1,000 years, was finished. Not by a fleet, but by a broadcast. Vlark did not move. He felt hollow. The grand conquest he had dreamed of was ash. He had sought to make his name legendary. He had succeeded. He would be remembered forever as the fool who broke an empire with a single, stupid mistake. A communication request chimed. It was from Elder Cthar. Vlark almost ignored it, but a final shred of duty made him accept. The Elder's face appeared. He looked even older, his shell brittle and dull. But there was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, cosmic sadness. "It is over," Cthar said, his voice a dry whisper. "The ascendancy is broken. Our subject species are free. Our own people are turning against the old ways. The Concordance is scrambling to contain the chaos you unleashed." Vlark found he had no voice. He could only listen. "We warned you," Cthar continued, not with triumph, but with grief. "One misstep. You provoked a species that does not simply defeat its enemies on a battlefield. You provoked a species that fights with the most powerful weapon in the universe. An idea. The idea that no one has to be a slave. The idea that even the smallest can fight the largest. They did not conquer us. They did not need to. They simply taught everyone else that we could be beaten." He looked directly at his great-grandson, and for a moment, there was a flicker of pity. "You thought their history of war was a sign of weakness. It was a lesson book, and you forced them to publish it for the entire galaxy. You did not just lose a fight, Vlark. You ruined everything we had built. Remember this, for as long as our species endures, remember the law you broke. Never provoke the humanity." The transmission ended. Vlark was left alone in the silence of his bridge, the ghost of a dead empire, his only company on Earth. The mood was quiet. There were no grand victory parades. The news of the Cthar collapse was met with a somber understanding. Price had been paid. A line had been crossed. Jean stood on a balcony, looking up at the night sky. The stars were sharp and clear. They no longer seemed distant and unknowable. They felt different. The galaxy had been listening. Sue stepped out from the building and stood beside him. She followed his gaze to the stars. "It's done," she said softly. "The Cthar are finished. The Concordance has sent a formal apology. They are renaming Sol System as a sovereign human territory. They will not bother us again." Jean nodded slowly. He did not look triumphant. He looked thoughtful. "Is it done?" he asked. "Or has it just begun?" He pointed a finger at the sky. "Out there, they now know our name. They know what we can do. They know what we represent. They will fear us, or they will admire us, or they will try to copy us. But they will never, ever ignore us again. He turned to Sue. The question is not what we did to stop them. The question is, what do we do now? Now that the whole galaxy is watching. Sue looked at the countless stars. Each one could be a friend or a new enemy or a species waiting for a message. The silence from Earth was over. Humanity had spoken. And now they had to decide what to say next.